Hello readers and welcome back to my channel. I'm Katie Ward and I'm an award-winning self-published author. My debut novel, The Pretender, was a top 30 YA Amazon bestseller, and I have also contributed to the first ever Writers and Artists Guide to Self-Publishing, which was published by Bloomsbury Press in March 2020. If you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll see that I have told you all of the things that went right and all of the things that I managed to achieve during my self-publishing process. So now what I wanted to do was to tell you all of the things that went wrong, because trust me, there were quite a few. So today in this video, I'm going to bring you the 5 mistakes I made when I started my self-publishing journey. The first mistake that I made on my self-publishing journey was pretty much the very first thing that I actually did. And that was when I came to decide the timeline for my book publication. So I had done research and I had found that in a traditional published setting, your publisher will publish within 6 months to a year. That's how long you will wait for your book to be published. And I was there thinking, that is so long. Why would they take that long? I have no idea. So I will do it in 4 months. Maybe there was a slight part of me that wanted to do it quicker, just to prove that I could. And so yeah, 4 months seemed like a completely reasonable amount of time for me to self-publish this book. However, I had made my first mistake. Because yes, 4 months might have been enough time to publish my book. However, it isn't enough time to comfortably publish my book. So it was very, very, very stressful for me when I came to publish my first book, because of the first thing that I did was set a really short timeline for me to have the book published. It gave very little time for me to actually have any time if anything went wrong, because trust me, this was not the only thing that I did wrong. So after I set my timeline of 4 months to publish my book, I then decided to look at the publicity that I would need to do, because I had read during my research, which you will obviously be doing as well if you're thinking of self-publishing, it had told me that I would need to make sure I had measures in place, such as a blog tour, to make sure that I secured them in the diary. So I did that pretty much. I did the timeline and then I did the blog tour. That was the first thing that I booked for my book. And I set in the date and everything was hunky-dory until I realized I had made another mistake. And that mistake was failing to realize that whilst the blog tour will take place on my launch date, those bloggers need to have your story to read a month beforehand. So that timeline that I had set for 4 months, actually it was 3 months. So I screwed myself over, not just by having a 4-month timeline, which was obviously really snug already. I then limited it even further to 3 months because I booked the blog tour without realizing, because I just didn't even think about it at all, that that would all need to be done a month beforehand. And yes, now I'm setting the stage, hopefully, for you to see that I really made a massive rod for my own back when I came to publish my first novel. You may be forgiven for thinking, surely having only a 3-month timeline to complete your entire book when publishers have 6 months to a year, surely that has to be the worst. It couldn't have got worse than that. Unfortunately, it really, really did. That actually was nothing in comparison to how bad it got. And my project was almost derailed completely by what happened next. So after I'd done the blog tour, I wanted to think about the cover and the typography, because obviously this is what's going to create your book. And these for me had to be brilliant. I love reading myself. So when I create my work, I want people to have that reader experience that I loved so much. So the quality has to be top notch. You have to not know that you are reading a self-published book. That is my standard when I come to write and produce my work. So I went out to look for a cover designer and I came across one that seemed brilliant. He had won awards, he had a big back catalogue, he had a nice swanky website. He also had been featured in multiple different media outlets, and he'd had all these different articles about him being up and coming. And I thought, you know what, this guy seems like he's going to be a really good guy with who I can trust to do my cover and to do my typography. So off I sent an email to him, and he responded saying, absolutely no problem, I'll fit you in if you could just pay a 50% deposit up front, and then he'll do obviously the cover and the typography, and then I would pay the remainder. Don't ever do this. Literally never ever do this, ever. Maybe I was naive and maybe this was all too good to be true, but having looked at him, his reviews and the articles about him, I felt very comfortable that he was a genuine guy and was not going to be unscrupulous. And so I happily paid the 50% deposit on my credit card and thought nothing of it. I liaised with him, sent him all the information that he needed, and heard nothing back. Surprise, surprise. So I gave him the space at the time. I had about a month in order to do this work because obviously I'm on an extremely tight deadline at this point. And so it came to about 2 weeks before I needed it back for the absolute deadline, and I still hadn't heard anything from him. So I tried to contact him, didn't hear anything back, and I was kind of probably sending like an email a day at this point saying, come back, you know, can you contact me and let me know what's going on? Are you going to be able to have this in time? And he came back saying that he was currently unwell and wouldn't be able to do anything at present. So that left me 2 weeks to find another person to do the typography and the cover designing. And I did not know if that was possible at this point. I was so stressed. At this point, I was on tenterhooks about how the hell I'm going to find another designer to do the cover and the typography of a whole book in 2 weeks. So I was going to stay local this time and try to find another cover designer who could do the impossible. And I came across a designer, and I went out to him, told him what had happened, how bad it had gone, and that I had this ultimate deadline to do. And I knew that it was a really, really big ask, but was there any chance that he could do it within a 2-week period? And he came back and he said, absolutely, I'll do it in a week. I was so great. I could have cried. I actually could have cried. He was my savior in more ways than one, because he just came in and was like, absolutely no problem. And he just did the work so quickly. However, with this really tight deadline, it wasn't just me that this impacted. It also impacted on the work that I was doing with my editor. It also impacted the work my illustrator was doing for me. So these 2 areas also were delayed because they had work and they were busy too. So everything about my book was actually delayed. So I think in the end, we had to push it to 3 weeks just because we're waiting for the editorial to come back. I think my cover designs came back first, and I think he focused on doing the cover initially whilst my editor had more time to kind of get the writing perfected. And there are a lot of changes that I made where I just sent him an email saying, can you please change all of these things in the final draft? So I don't actually have a Word document of my final manuscript that is completely perfect, because I made so many changes on screen, if you like, through him. And he was brilliant. Anything that I asked of him, he just did it, and I could not have found a better designer or cover designer to help me at that point in time than him, given how bad it had been previously. So in short, never, ever, ever give a 50% deposit. And when I spoke to the nice designer, shall we say, he said no, he would never have asked for money up front. He will only ever ask for it afterwards. That cover designer, he wasn't unwell, I don't believe, because his website then went completely offline. He is now back and doing the same thing again, I imagine, because those kind of people don't suddenly clean up their act. So please, to anyone who is going to go down the self-publishing route, do not be seduced by a good website. Don't be seduced by good write-ups even. And even if they are in the media, doesn't mean that they won't con you, because I was completely conned. It nearly derailed everything for me, and it nearly completely destroyed my project. Luckily, I was able to recover it. But if they ask you for a 50% deposit up front, they will con you. Do not take the chance. Go and find someone who doesn't need that, because I swear to you, you will help yourself so much, because you don't need the hassle of being conned when you're trying to produce a book through the self-publishing route. So if you're going to self-publish, you will most likely do it through Amazon KDP. And what you would do is you would have a Word version of your book and you would upload it through KDP, and it would convert the Word document into the correct file that KDP needed. And it would send you back a preview in what's called a Mobi version. And that Mobi version would be a preview of the entire book, of what it's going to look like as a Kindle or as a paperback. And you would then send that Mobi version to the organizer of the blog tour, who would then send that out to your bloggers, who would then be able to access it on their Kindle and be able to review it and see the covers and all of the design. However, this is another area, wasn't necessarily a mistake on my part, but it was an area that went so wrong. It did not work at all. And this was because, for me, quality of my book and having that reader experience was really important to me. So I didn't want to upload with a Word version, because you can get some anomalies with the page. So the spacing can sometimes be incorrect. It can cut off mid-sentence and then have like a massive gap and then have text again. And it doesn't always present really well if you upload it through a Word document. So my designer, he had a very technical knowledge. So what he did is he created, obviously, the cover and the pages, laid them all out perfectly, and they looked absolutely fantastic. Then what he did is he converted the files into the correct KDP files, so that when he uploaded it onto Amazon, KDP didn't need to convert it because it was already in the format that they needed. This created a bit of a problem in that when doing that, it didn't generate this preview or the Mobi version that I needed to give my blog tour organizer. And it took us pretty much about 6 months to be able to work out how to get a Mobi version. Well, at this point, I really had so little time to do this. In the end, I think actually I had 2 weeks, but I think we actually pushed it to 3 weeks in the end. I think that's what happened. We really had to push the timeline a little more than we would have wanted to. We got the blog tour organizer what she needed in a roundabout way. So she was saying, we need this Mobi version. And I kept saying, we don't have this Mobi version, it won't do it. So she helpfully then asked me to send it to her in a PDF. And I do not know what she did, but she magically made it into a Mobi for me. And I don't know if it was an exact Mobi, but she made it into a Kindle format so that she could send it out to her bloggers so that they would have it in time for them to do their reviews ahead of my launch date. So I managed to get that to her in time, and she managed to work some magic to make that work. But we didn't actually get it into an actual Mobi version until about 6 months later, because it was so difficult to navigate that kind of anomaly within Amazon. We didn't obviously anticipate that even happening. It isn't something I think most self-published authors have come across. I know that a lot of people were quite surprised when I told them. But for me, I really wanted to create a book where nobody could tell that it had been self-published. I knew that there were flaws within publishing it through Word, and I wanted to avoid that. So I'm really pleased that I did do it that way, but I wish somebody could have told me that there was a real big issue if you do it that way, and I could have foreseen that anomaly so that I didn't have quite as much stress as I actually did have in the end. The final mistake that I made when I came to publish my debut novel, The Pretender, was that I didn't understand about beta readers. I don't think I had picked up on this. I hadn't really heard anything about the importance of sending my book out to be read by other people who would critique it, if you like, and be able to tell me the kind of issues that they had with the plot and with the characters and if they were believable. I did get people to read it, but they were more people quite close to me, and they had kind of a short time frame this is a recurring theme through the whole journey here, is that there was a very short timeline. And I feel like this was a big mistake on my part, because there was feedback that I got through my blog tour that if I had gone out to a beta reader, would have given that back to me, and I could have amended it and just kind of tweaked it. It was nothing major. It wasn't anything that took away from the enjoyment. But for an author, you want your work to be perfect. And I felt that by not realizing about beta readers and not sending it out properly in the way that I should have done, I took away the chance for me to make it absolutely perfect. It still obviously has won awards and people still really, really like it. But I know about those little things that people have said, and I thought, actually, they made a valid point there. And if they had made that valid point before I had published, it would have just been a slight tweak. It wouldn't have had to even been anything that big. It was nothing structural or anything. It was just tiny little tweak that I could have made that would have just taken that off the table and would have made it absolutely perfect. So for anyone who is considering doing their own self-published journey, just understand that beta readers are really important. It's your first critique, if you like, before you get out to the readers. And if you've got a problem or something that doesn't work within your writing, because you do write in stages. And I know when I came to read The Pretender for the very first time, I realised that every single dress colour in my book was blue. And this happened because I would write a chapter one week and think, oh, that's a nice dress, I'll make it blue, that's my favourite colour. And then 3 weeks later, I'd write another scene and go, oh, what dress? Oh, blue, that's my favourite colour. So each time I was doing the exact same thing. And when I came to read it, every single dress was exactly the same, all different variants of blue: midnight blue, sky blue, pastel blue, navy blue, but they were all blue. And so I had to quickly change all of those things. And it's the kind of thing you don't realise until you read it all the way through. But here's the other thing: as the author, you will also be prone to reading what you think you've written rather than what you've actually written. And I have fallen foul of that. And that's why editors and beta readers are really important, to give you that line of defense before you go to the readers to say, actually, this bit doesn't work, this character needs to be tweaked, or what happened to this person, they've just disappeared. Because that is the kind of rabbit hole that you can easily fall down as an inexperienced new self-published author. When I come to do my next journey, I already have them ready to go, because I'm not going to make that mistake twice. Thank you so much for joining me on this video. I hope you've really enjoyed it. If you have, please do put comments in the comments box below, because I'm always happy to hear from you. If there's something I've discussed in this video or previous videos that you would like more detail on, or there's something you would like me to cover, then please do let me know in the comments box too, because I'm always happy to do that. This, like I've said before, is an interactive channel, and I want to create a community where people who want more information on self-publishing can come and learn some of the mistakes that I've made or the things that have gone well, and know what to avoid, know what to adopt. And then if they do the same, then we create this community of people who all help each other create the best work that we can and become the authors that we really want to be, because ultimately that's what we're all here for. We all have the same end goal. So if you do like this channel and you like the content and you would like to know more about the self-publishing process, do please like and subscribe so that you don't miss any of my videos. And I thank you again for joining me, and I hope that you will join me in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, goodbye.